If you think of it this way, the whole industry is driven by end users or investors or lenders that want to take a bet on emerging technology, but the
Hmm.
company providing that may not be proven just yet. They might be venture funded, angel funded, unprofitable, who knows?
Yeah.
One recent example is an ongoing client that we work with, loaned an extremely large amount of money to a bank, Canadian bank that loaned a lot of money to an emerging tech company in the
Hmm.
self-driving auto space.
Hey guys, welcome to the Grow IT podcast. Your host here, joined today by Chris Smith, the CEO over at Praxis Technology Escrow. Today's going to be an interesting episode. We're going to be diving into a little bit about his story, his background, kind of what his company is really doing within the space, and some interesting industry trends. So make sure to stick around. But without further ado, I'll just pass it on over to you, Chris. If you don't mind, just giving a quick, introduction to the audience and telling them a little bit about yourself.
Chris Smith, founder and CEO of Praxis Technology Escrow. We serve in the very fine niche of the technology industry called software and technology escrow. What we do is essentially help emerging technology companies land their early enterprise clients by giving that enterprise customer a way to support the technology, even if the software company should go out of business. So it's a little bit like a life
Yeah.
insurance policy or a will for your technology from emerging companies.
Yeah, interesting. And then I'm very curious just to rewind the clock back just a little bit, right? Obviously, I see you're a commercial photographer for a while, and then you obviously went to start your own company. What was that? What was it that led you down that path to want to start Praxis Technology in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really rewinding the clock, I really didn't know what I wanted to do coming out of school. I thought I wanted to be a basketball coach and a teacher, and quickly
Mhm.
realized that I didn't like kids, and so had to find a way to make a living. Got into commercial photography a little bit by an accident. Became pretty successful at that, but found that even successful photographers starve oftentimes.
Hmm.
Used to do a lot of commercial work for Bell South, AT&T now, Nike, lots of really fun, exciting jobs, but
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of money in that. Eventually, as I wanted to start a family, got married and found my way going into technology
Hmm.
sales, selling local and wide area networks, and
Hmm.
had some success doing that. But one day I received a call from a recruiter who asked me if I'd like to explore a profitable niche in the technology space. And at that time, Michael Dell was beginning to sell computers directly out of his dorm room and sort of collapse the channel for value-added resellers. And so
Hmm.
that call was very interesting to me. That was 1998, and I've been in the technology escrow space ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so, just on Praxis Technology Escrow space, like what are some of the trends that are, popping up right now within the industry that you've seen just from being inside the industry for a little bit? What are those things that are kind of top of mind for you?
Yeah, there's two. So again, I've been in this basically my whole adult life, and the big, if you will, threat to the industry or the big challenge has
Hmm.
always been, there's been a couple. One is, how do we know we have the latest source code in escrow?
Yeah.
So you have these secret materials and the documentation, et cetera, but how do we know if that's the right stuff, the current version, if we need it? And that was one of the fundamental questions that was always difficult to answer. You could always do testing, but technology changes so often that the escrow materials had to be updated very often as well. And I had sold a previous technology escrow company back in 2012, rode off into the sunset, never thought I would come back, and
Hmm.
started investing in some software companies and
Yeah.
learned about GitHub and Bitbucket and source code archival systems. And a light
Wow.
bulb went off for me that said technology escrow agents should attach themselves to these GitHub instances. That way we can harvest the then current escrow materials all the time. And so
Mm.
we created the world's first automated escrow solution back in 2016. That's actually what brought me back to the market. So your question was, what challenges are out there? The rapid change of technology brought on by agile development has
Yeah.
meant that traditional escrow models are outdated and almost guarantee that you don't have functioning escrow materials in place. Our model fixes that by literally cloning the current source code every week and saving it forever. We have an infinite
Huh.
retention program, so we keep it forever.
Interesting. And I think what might help with even the audience to kind of wrap their head around this is that like like if you could share like a customer success story that you don't have to drop any names or anything, but something that kind of comes to mind of like how you've helped them before they obviously came to you and some of the transformation you're able to deliver afterwards.
Yeah, I'm happy. So, if you think of it this way, the whole industry is driven by end users or investors or lenders that want to take a bet on emerging technology, but the
Hmm.
company providing that may not be proven just yet. They might be venture funded, angel funded, unprofitable, who knows?
Yeah.
So one recent example is an ongoing client that we work with, loaned an extremely large amount of money to a bank, Canadian bank that loaned a lot of money to an emerging tech company in the
Hmm.
self-driving auto space,
Hmm.
right? So it's a very much an emerging field. They're a strong player in that space, but their economic model hasn't been fully proven. As they're getting traction, they pull down more and more money out of their credit facility, and the bank wants to make sure that the technology that's in escrow is complete, accurate, and functional if the bank has to pull that collateral out and support the technology on their own. So it's a very
Hmm.
that one's a loan-based technology is collateral escrow.
Huh.
Another more common example is you get large companies. We have a pharmaceutical company that's partnered with a software as a service provider
Yeah.
that is capturing data from mobile phones and
Yeah.
analyzing that data and providing it back to the pharmaceutical company. That app company
Wow.
is brand new, emerging, and the pharma company is making a huge bet on that technology and wants to make sure that they can get access to the data and the analytics, even if the software company fails.
It's super fascinating stuff to me because it's always so interesting how there's so many niches, right? Like there's like such like these like little pockets that you can, build a business within. And like, this type
Yeah.
of technology is obviously you could see the value proposition when you obviously outline it, but it's something that you never even think of, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
me personally, I've never thought of this as an actual, technology escrow, but it makes sense as to why you would need something like this, right? Um,
And most of our clients only deal with this, a handful of times in their career. So it's every day that we have this conversation to even people that have been, CTO for 30 years may never have run into a situation that required it. And
yeah.
then they stumble into this need and so they discover the niche the same way you are right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so how has that been like growing a company, that is so like niche focused, like Praxis? Like what's that experience been like? And, would you say that you prefer like growing in kind of a niche market and like growing out this specific service?
It's a good question. So in my prior career in the selling computer hardware and software, it was
Hmm.
more or less a commodity. And that's when Michael Dell went direct, he flattened out the whole supply chain and it, you know, for better or worse, regardless how you feel about that, it changed the dynamics quite a bit. This
Yeah.
is the opposite. So it's such a fine niche of the space and pretty quickly, it takes a few years to become really fluent in all of the ins and outs of this, maybe a little bit longer, your expertise is your advantage. And so having done thousands of these over the last, I don't know what it is, almost 28 years or so now,
Yeah.
there's just an experience level that is the value add is how can we solve this problem? And they all have some uniqueness to it. So I actually really enjoy the fact that it's a fine niche. It does prove challenging because you and I have been talking now for 10 minutes or so, and you're just starting to understand what we do. So it takes a
Yeah.
minute to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the good news and the bad news. It does make it organic growth is a little bit slow,
Yeah.
but the revenue is really sticky. So it's
Yeah.
worth it. But it's the first few years are a chore for sure.
Yeah, and what would you recommend to, like other founders or CEOs that maybe have more of that, niche offering? Because we talk with a lot of folks like that on the podcast, right? They have these little pockets that they find, whether it's in, healthcare IT or if it's, like a cybersecurity, specific thing for a cybersecurity piece. Like what would be your recommendation to kind of how how you've grown as a company, right, in this niche?
Yeah. So I mean, assuming you have a use case that's been proven, there's more
Mm,
than one person that needs it. Look at the way that you acquire that business. I read somewhere years and years ago that most companies have one primary way that they win new business. And in our case, for example, it tends to be Google pay-per-click
mm,
advertisements. Because
mm.
we're such a fine niche, people stumble across us through Google searches.
Yeah.
And so we call it the magic call. We'll have this first 45-minute call with customers to explain what this is, how it works, why they, might want to do it. And
Yeah.
that's been our best growth tool, if you will.
Yeah.
So, but my point is, most businesses have one way of gaining clients that's most effective, and really you got to figure out what that is and then reinvest in that until it stops, the return slows, or diminishes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've had some good success with those PPC campaigns then in terms of running Google for the high intent kind of keywords then. That's been
Correct. Yeah, yeah, it's been great. It's super competitive, very expensive. So it does become a challenge to, to ROI that. So we develop other methods as well. So,
yeah.
contacting our existing customers again, contacting certain parties to ask for referrals. But to your question, find the one thing that brings the most customers in the door and then reinvest in it. It has to be in a profitable way until the return diminishes. And then you have to start, the challenge starts again is, can we find another channel, another way to grow?
Yeah, it's a great point though, right? You always have to work it back from, the customer acquisition cost and then the customer lifetime value, right? What is that? What are those metrics that you have that you can work within, knowing how much you can spend on the front end to acquire the customer? Then, like you said, until you just keep putting money back into the machine. If it keeps working, you don't stop, right? There's no reason to.
Customer
So
acquisition cost, it's an ongoing pursuit for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, obviously, like when it comes to like overall starting a business, right? When it comes to actually just going out there and, being the CEO and actually, I don't know if you bootstrapped, I'm not sure what that actually looked like, but just the idea of starting a company, right? It can be scary for a lot of folks, right? Especially maybe they want to go out there and they want to, start their business, they want to do something, they have some type of idea that they want to roll through with. What was it that maybe helped you kind of make that jump to that entrepreneurship side of things, and something that you'd recommend for folks if they're in that position?
Yeah, so I was not a great student growing up, but towards the end of college, I became a fairly avid reader, and I stumbled across a book. I don't remember when exactly, early '90s, maybe, The Millionaire Next Door. I live in
Mm.
Atlanta. It was written by a guy that lived here, and it basically the premise or the thing that I remembered most from that book is that you can't afford not to own your own business if you
Mm.
want to build true wealth because of income tax. And so
Yeah.
if you're paying, a large amount of income tax every year, it's difficult to grow. If you have a business, it can grow tax deferred over time, and that was really what pushed me. My parents were entrepreneurs too, so that helped. I grew up in that household and that environment. But when I really understood the way to build wealth was, or said another way, the risk was in not starting your own business, or at least owning your own investments, real estate, or whatever it's going to be. But that's the risk. The risk is it's different. I saw it as different than what most people do. So at that point, I realized I had to own my own businesses and set out on a path. And
Yeah.
it sort of magically made it less scary. I wouldn't say it made it any easier, but
Yeah.
I've bootstrapped a couple different businesses, and it's very difficult for sure. You have to
Yeah.
be willing to eat rice and beans sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But that's a great point though. I mean, I love that. I think that there's always a risk to inaction, right? To not doing something and to actually pushing it down the road and saying you're going to get to it. And especially when it comes to, I would agree, especially in today's economy, when it comes to building a business, that's really the only way that you're going to be able to access true wealth, right? It's the only way that, like, to your point, right, when it comes to building wealth and building an asset. I think that's the beautiful thing about also building a business is that, a lot of people think about just the income that comes from it. But if you build a good business, right, you build a business that has enterprise value, you're also building like something that you can sell at some point, or it's, and so that to me, I think is the most important part of it. And then also, you get to, I'm sure that you've changed along the way, right? Of these companies have probably changed you, and they've probably shaped you into who you are as well, right? As you built these companies, it almost you get your battle scars, right? You
Well,
get
as you were talking there, it reminded me, um, this is just the way that I did it, right? But and I'm stubborn, so I read that book, it resonated with me, I did it that way. I have friends that have made, fortunes, absolute fortunes by buying Bitcoin early and and understanding that and believing in that long term a long time ago. And I own almost no Bitcoin. And my largest expense for years was Google pay-per-click ads, and I own zero shares of Google. So my stubbornness is both good and limiting. I always tell people that I've lost more fortunes than I've even come close to making. There's several examples, but Bitcoin's a great example. All these different stocks, but I think if you want a sure thing and a ROI on your time, owning your own business, it's difficult to beat that in most cases.
That's a great point, right? And it's to find those types of stocks, though, right? To find those types of opportunities, right? Not to say that they're not impossible to find, because you can
Yeah,
definitely find that. But to be able to get in that early and make that amount of wealth, even with a limited investment, you have to almost have there's an element of luck that's involved in that as well, right? When you're obviously
correct.
investing. I mean, as so is when you're building your business, right? There's an element of luck as well. There's always an element of some type of fortune that you need, right? To build fortunes. But in terms of investing, the way that I've always thought about it is, and I definitely could be wrong here, but I've always figured that it's better to have like at least liquid a lot of liquid cash before you start investing into other assets, because at that point, if you're putting only $1,000 or $2,000 into these assets, what type of wealth are you really gonna like? It's you need to get 100 or like a 200x, and I feel like so many people are obsessed with finding those 100x's, when instead you should be investing into your skills that will always be there, and that's what's going to be able to make you real money. And so that's the way I think about things. I mean, at the current point, I'm still a lot to learn as I continue to be on my pursuit, but it's all about skills pay the bills, right? That's always what I've always referred to. And like you said, like building a business, that's a skill. Being a CEO and knowing how to run a business, that's a level of experience that you have to have, right? That comes with the job itself.
Correct. Yep. And lots of, it's on the job experience too. I mean, and the cool thing about running a business is that if you need to, you can pivot, right? So at
Mm,
least in most businesses, you can change the way your software works, or you can, if you're a service business like we are, we can add new services or expand. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility that, if you bought one stock and you're all in on one stock and it tanks, well, then there went your future. So,
yeah,
um,
and it's the fun thing
I
about business
generally
too.
speaking, I think it's right. Is you're going to, take some of your nickels and dimes and invest them in the long shots, but invest in your skills. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you were like to, maybe summarize, because you've done a lot throughout your career, right? I've just was looking at your experience and just all the things that you've done and the companies that you've started. Um, you know, if you had to share this is a loaded question, so be prepared. But if you had to share some of like the most important things that you've learned in your career throughout your whole career, what would you say that those things are that you'd be willing to share with the audience?
Um, I think the most important thing that I have learned is that failure is just a stepping stone towards success, and you're definitely going to fail. I've learned to read, and the information is definitely out there. May not be perfect for what you're doing. Like there's no books written on how to start a software escrow company, but there's plenty of books written that are about service companies or what have you. And then I
Yeah.
think lastly, and the thing that I didn't do early in my career was, get some type of mentorship.
Hmm.
Successful entrepreneurs are, I've learned this the hard way, are almost always super happy and generous to share information, connections. And the biggest mistake that I made early was not seeking those people out. About 15 years ago or so, I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a worldwide network of
Huh.
entrepreneurs, and that was a life-changing event to you get paired up with a small group. They call it your forum. These six
Hmm.
or eight guys and girls that own businesses, and it's like an informal board of advisors, and that's been invaluable in learning, but also bouncing ideas off somebody before you put it in place. Stuff like that. It's been really good.
I think that's a great advice, right? I think that there's no better way to learn from the mistakes of others than through like a business mentor, right? Or through a community of folks, right? That you can lean upon. Because I think for anybody that started their own business, you start to realize it could be a very lonely path, right? It could be a very lonely road. And to be able to have people that have gone down that path or can teach you things that maybe, or have the foresight, because I think that's a big thing too, is what I'm learning. Thankfully, I have a partner that's, in our business that's older than I am, but I don't always have the foresight that he does, right? And I can recognize that because I've never done those things before, right? It's like all that I'm learning these new things. And I think that's so important having like a mentor, having someone that can, give you their experience that they've learned, right? That they've had to go through the battles with, and then you can be able to learn from that. And that's the way that you expedite your growth rather than having to go through. It's like, you have to burn your hand. If you put your hand on the fire, you have to learn that the fire is warm. If you want to go and touch it to feel it's warm, or if you could tell somebody else could tell you, hey, it's warm, don't touch that.
Right. Right. So, but I was so stubborn that I would try, each finger first before I was convinced that it was hot. But yeah, so again, who said this? Was it Michael Jordan? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, or somebody, I forget who said that, but
Yeah.
you also have to take the risk and understand you can what's the word I'm looking for here? Limit the risk in your business ventures by reading and learning and mentoring and investing cautiously and testing the market and rapid prototyping and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you still have to take that risk, and that's where the reward comes from
Yep.
over
Yep.
time. And
Yeah.
it's why it's not very crowded, because most people won't take the risk. You might have to give up your fancy car. I've done that. Sold early days when we started our first business back in the early 2000s. I sold my nice car, quit my nice job, gave up my stock options. And, I gave my wife, $40,000 in savings and said, this has got to get us through the year. And, it was tough. So
Yeah.
that's why most people won't do it.
Yeah, yeah, but it's what makes you into who you are though when you do those things as well, right? Like that's what it kind of gets that's the beautiful thing about I think about entrepreneurship is it teaches you so much about yourself as well. And as you go through the journey, you learn so much and you become a different person, right? Because of it. Like the journey that you go through on the mountain, climbing the mountaintop, right? And it's like a never-ending mountain, right? Because you get to one top and then there's a next top and then there's, depending on what you're trying to do. So
That's right.
and I love that. I love what you said. It's what's the greater risk when you think about it as well, right? Like, is it the greater risk to start the company, or is it greater risk to not start the company, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's always that element of risk, whatever you do. So it's like it's almost like choose your risk, right? Choose your hard in a sense, you
Well,
know?
so when I was your age, my thought was, well, I'll try this, and if it doesn't work, I can always just go get another job, right?
Yeah,
And you might lose some capital in the short term, but you might hit a home run or even a single. A single
yeah,
and a double sometimes is still well worth it, because, like you said, if you have an active business that's cash productive, it's valuable even if you don't work there, so you can sell it.
yeah,
Now at my age, the risk is guys that I know that never started their own business are getting laid off from jobs, or they get fired and they can't get hired again because they're super expensive. They're towards the end of their career, and a lot of these companies are leaning towards younger people, and so there's risk on the other end of it that doesn't get talked about much.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And that
Hopefully they
that
have a bunch of 401k money and that sort of thing, but if they don't, it's a problem.
yeah. Yeah, and you said that book. What did you learn that from that book, The Millionaire Next Door? Where they talked about that, or is that something that you kind of just picked up,
I
throughout
don't I don't know. I don't know where I learned some of this stuff, but that book was really the start of, for me, the start of I was convinced that I had to take the entrepreneurial journey anyway. And so that's led to a variety of things, including real estate investments. And, I've tried several businesses that have failed. Like, I'm okay with that. I've put
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars in businesses that have failed. I mean, I don't want to do that. It wasn't fun at the time, but it's part of the process.
I've heard it's paying your ignorance tax, right? Like it's like paying your ignorance debt off, right? And almost in those ventures sometimes has to happen. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. And I sat down with one of my sons as he was trying to decide what he was going to do. He ended up deciding to go to law school, but I sat down with him and I drew a little flow chart of my career and how it's worked. And in two or three cases, there's been this little 3-year window where, I'm unemployed is a good way to say it. I'm in between ventures and I'm rapid prototyping different businesses. And, it looks like a disaster, but really it's just almost like a creative process to figure out what's the next thing going to be that sticks. Where you start getting you ask a question early on about growth will find something that people will buy and pay for, learn how you got them, and then go get a bunch more of those. And one example, I've been a career or lifelong photographer, really. One example, after I sold my last business, I started this company doing seminars around the world. I was taking top-rated photographers and putting together almost like a travel business. And
Yeah.
I started doing that. And the first one that we did was great success financially and otherwise, but the photographer ended up like sleeping with one of the models,
Oh
and
boy.
I was like, I don't want to deal with any of this.
Yeah.
It was just like babysitting, and I scrapped the whole business. Even though it would have been successful, I didn't want to deal with the issues, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things, right? And I feel like a lot of it's in a way, it's timing, right? It's just like, it's always about like finding the right thing at the right time. And like you said, it's almost, and that's why when you do put yourself out there and you have multiple opportunities, it's almost like it's bound to happen at some point, right? Like as long as you continue to be innovative, you try to find the right thing at the right time, and you will at some point be able to crack something, crack the code, get better as an entrepreneur, figure out, because I think that's the big thing too, is you start to recognize trends more as you get better and better, right? You start to look at things a little bit differently, and you're like, wait a second, and you're quicker on action, instead of like being like super slow to action. At least that's what I've noticed in myself, right? And it's almost that fine balance of knowing when to, like you said, when to pivot and also when to stay the course, right? When you should just
No,
go through the
you're
wall.
absolutely right. So that is a perfect way to put when I left the software escrow world and started a software company, I thought I had learned about software from serving software companies for so long.
Yeah.
And we were at the very end of our cash rope. We'd burned off all of our investment. And I'm sitting there watching this engineer check code in and out of GitHub. And the light bulb went off for me. It was like, wait a minute, this is super valuable for the last industry that I was in, right? Because the trend in the escrow industry still today, for the most part, is software companies have to push the escrow deposit to the software escrow agent. It's a very manual process, and we found a way to connect directly to their archive where it's already living. So
Hmm.
we literally got rid of 100% of the effort, and we guarantee that we have the latest and greatest code. We fixed one of the biggest problems because I was looking at the last little pieces of a failing software company. That's where I saw that trend, and I would have never seen it.
Yeah.
Had I stayed in the escrow business, I would have never seen that trend. But because of agile development, software is changing all the time, and they're using engineers all over the world. So they had to develop these archival systems where people could check in and out code and work on it from 16 different locations. And that hub, the GitHub, it's like a magical thing for us. But
Wow.
if I hadn't failed at the software company, I wouldn't have known. It's so it was
Yeah.
a few $100,000 lesson, but it was well worth it.
Yeah. 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 No, I love it. And I think that's a perfect note to end on, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's been an absolute pleasure getting the chance to hear a little bit more about your story and your entrepreneurial journey and kind of the reality of it, right? Like I think that's the biggest thing that, I loved about this conversation was the raw reality, right? It's not always going to be up, right? People think it's just always up, but it's more like this, right? And then you're as long as you keep going, you have that right direction, you have the directional path in mind. So, like I said, thanks again for coming on, Chris. If people are listening to this, they want to reach out to you or what you guys see what you guys are doing. What are some ways that they can go ahead and find you?
I mean, the easiest way is our website. It's praxisescrow.com. So praxis is Greek for practice. It's a verb. So
Hmm.
the company's name, translated as Praxis or Praxis Technology Escrow. So it's Praxis escrow, escrow.com. I
Okay.
recognize that's a mouthful. Sorry about that.
No, no, I'll put that in the description there. Make sure to go check out Chris and the team, guys. If you guys did make it all the way to the end, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Thanks again, Chris, for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day.